Now, preserving heritage in the era of the Fourth Industrial Revolution will be under the spotlight during a panel discussion at the University of Pretoria today. The university is marking National Book Week and Heritage Month. In studio with us is Nandi Madadasana, who was involved with organizing the event. Nandi, thank you so much for coming through this morning. What is this all about?
What this is about really is combining two most important calendar events on a SA calendar. Here we are combining the National Heritage Celebration as well as the National Book Week. So the reason why we're doing this event with the University of Pretoria libraries is that it is important that we focus on how we preserve our heritage. So, and then what we've decided to do was to call on veterans and ambassadors really of our heritage. A person like Professor Pitika Ntuli, who's going to be giving a keynote specifically on that, looking at the dynamics of heritage preservation in the era of the Fourth Industrial Revolution, because we know now it's a digital era, and then there's lots of AI involved now. So now the question is, how do we preserve the heritage that we already have? So, but on top of it again, because it's the library and it's also the book week, we decided that we'll also have a panel discussion where we are celebrating this day with the children of the fallen struggle heroes who have actually written books. So, and the whole agenda behind it really is that how do we shape a conversation as a nation that embraces national heritage, but it also says what is the social cohesion, what is a shared heritage that we can start having as a country. So, and that's where we're having Shumelo Biko, who is Mr. Steve Biko's son, as well as Lindy Wehani is also she's also there talking about her book as well that she wrote.
Both fantastic participants.
Indeed, indeed. But what is also important element that we've attached to it is that Prof. Reddy, he's the Dean of the Faculty of Humanities. So he's going to be coming into the discussion from a research perspective in terms of the dynamics within our society as a South Africa and the identities that are already there. How do we shape our country in view of the past that we have?
So one of the big dynamics is the very one that's highlighted in the theme of Heritage Month, which is about our literary classics, but specifically honing in on indigenous languages. How well researched, how well put, how much are indigenous language books out there, especially on the commercial front? Is there an appetite in the South African audiences for South African language books?
Actually, that is that dynamic is very sensitive because we have not, I feel, from my perspective, have promoted the African literature. And I think now we're starting to change how we're doing things. So it has not been that much in the spotlight, but this is what we're also trying to do now, is to how do we start writing our own stories? Because if we don't write our own stories, somebody else will write our stories from their perspective. So now this is starting to shift a bit because now we're starting to push as a University of Pretoria, pushing for people to start writing and preserving their knowledge for the next generation, yes.
So as we're talking about encouraging people to write and read, then comes in the other spanner in the works, the Fourth Industrial Revolution.
Yes.
How are we adapting to that?
Yes, that specific part is actually very sensitive as well, because we do know what is currently happening. People are losing jobs due to the AI. But what is very interesting in terms of what the University of Pretoria Library has done is that it has actually pioneering in that field, because they've got a robot called Libby. So yes,
spoken about it on the show.
You've spoken to Libby, yes. So now what this has done, it has actually not led to any job loss. In fact, they started hiring people around the robot called Libby. So in this way, they're getting their staff to be reskilled and upskilled to do other jobs. So all the repetitive jobs will actually be done by the machine. So now they are balancing how the machine and the human are interacting. And it looks it looks promising and it looks good.
Reskilling is the big conversation really around 4IR, isn't it?
Indeed, indeed it is. Indeed it is, because we cannot run away from the fact that the 4IR is here, or the AI is here.
Yeah.
We just have to embrace it. But the question is, how do we then get to say, how do we work with the machines? Remember, this phenomenon is not actually new. People have been losing jobs. Industries have been disappearing. For example, we no longer have the milkman coming and knocking and selling us milk. We no longer now are focusing so much on writing letters and taking them to the post box and taking them to the post office, and then a postman comes.
It's an immediate
and
activity now.
It's immediate now.
Yeah.
So we have had to embrace technology before. So it's not something new. But now I think because it has taken us by a big shock, due to the massive job losses, but I believe that it's actually going to be taking us to the next level of how we work.
So writing books and reading books is always a conversation about society. The big conversations in our society right now is gender-based violence, attacks on foreign nationals, the release of high crime stats. How are you incorporating social conversation into the project that you're doing today?
Today, we're not necessarily focusing on those aspects. Today, we are really focusing on the shared experiences of the authors in terms of how they view heritage from their perspective, from their own personal experiences. Remember, these are the children. It feels so bad to say they're children because they're not children now, but they were children then. And they are reflecting on their experiences at that time. But most importantly now today, the focus is more on, yes, I went through what I went through, but this is how I see the future. This is my vision from my perspective. And what is also interesting is how also Hlumelo Biko is going to be taking things from his perspective, because he writes more about the economy, about an Africa reimagined. So now we're getting authors talking to the audience, and the audience is going to be able to have an opportunity to interact and ask questions.
It should be an interesting perspective. His father played a really big, massive role. You can't mention South Africa's heritage without mentioning Steve Biko.
Indeed, indeed. And you know what is also going to be interesting that's going to be happening there is the Office of the Director General, with a specific focus really on government's investment in indigenous knowledge systems and Pan-African history, because the government does have a policy and framework around that. So now it's a matter of we need to know what is going on in that space. And the government is also pushing towards us having to write these Pan-African stories. I mean, we have seen what is happening in education already. For example, you saw what happened with here in Gauteng, where there's the renaming of the schools, because the whole thing is that we need to be much more inclusive. Our spaces, our shared spaces need to speak to everybody. But what is also interesting in what is happening in basic education as well is that now the curriculum is going to change now in terms of looking specifically into entrenching into our kids' young minds the African pride. Identity. Indeed. So now when they start learning about their own, or the forefathers and their own history, it helps them shape their own future instead of embracing that which is not them or that doesn't look like them.
So which, you told us about Hlumelo, which other books can we expect you will be interrogating at this gathering?
We've got Professor Pitika Ntuli's books as well, because he's also one of the, he's also an author of note. So his book will also be available. We've got a pop-up store that is there, so people will be able to also buy the books should they feel. But we also have Steve Biko's books as well that are also available on the day.
Ms. Hani's book as well, I imagine. People watching right now, is it only per invitation or is it open to the public? How can people access the event?
It is open to the public, so people are welcome to come to the university. And the entrance that's going to be
Is this in Pretoria?
It's in the University of Pretoria library. Yes, indeed, at the University Road entrance.
Thank you so much for talking to us today. It seems like an interesting project. Tell us about your work as the CEO of Boon Enterprises.
Our work, it's actually something new that we've started doing 2 years ago, that we started saying, let us have critical conversations. But then what's important about the conversations we're starting to have now is that we need to start see what impact these conversations would have.
Otherwise, why?
Otherwise, why? Because
why
we talk all the time,
yeah.
we write all the time, but what is it that we're actually doing? But what's also important is how we put different stakeholders together so that we all speak with one voice, because most of the time you find us working in silos. So now we are able to say, this is what government is doing, this is what private sector is doing, but this is how the general public feels. So how do we engage? And we focus a lot more on the 4th industrial revolution, because we need to start having less fear around how do we deal with the challenge that is facing us. So that's what we are doing really, and we form these partnerships with NGOs, we form the partnerships with the government departments as well as government agencies and academia, because that's where these conversations need to start happening. For example, now with the library, we're starting now to change how the dynamics within the library is going to work. I mean, we've always known the library, when you're in university, it's a place where you shush. You must keep quiet because, you know, it's a library space. But now we're starting to say, how do we bring about conversations such as this, where we're bringing the author and the audience together, and then you have that dialogue.
Yeah.
So, and then in this way, it's starting to imagine, so to speak, what a library can actually look like and what can be done in the library.
What time do you start?
Oh, we've already started.
Okay.
I think by now the Vice Chancellor is probably done doing his welcome address. And then after him is probably going to be Professor Peter Gantuli's time now.
So we then probably have to thank you very much for making the time to come through, Nandi Madadasana. Thank you so much for coming through. Nandi is the CEO of Boon Enterprises, talking to us about today's National Book Week and Heritage Month.